Okay, so we mentioned a little bit about Plutchik in our last lesson, and I want to make sure that you guys understand it. So I want you to think of this theory of emotion as though it's a wheel, and rather than just 6 emotions, there are 8. And so what happens is we have these pairs of opposites, and it works similar to that of the color wheel in that you have the colors that blend next to one another. But the deal is that you cannot experience the opposite emotions at the same time. So if you're looking at a color wheel, I think blue and orange are opposites, and so you can't experience, for instance, blue and orange at the same time. Because one is positive and one is negative. And what's interesting is that both the positive and the negative emotions can impact our health in some way. And so here is our color wheel. And I was right. You can see, for example, that orange and blue are opposites, and pink and lime green, and red and green, and so on. And so you cannot experience joy and sadness at the same time. It is virtually impossible. What's interesting about this, though, is that you have all of the outlying emotions. And so these outlying emotions are then combinations of the 2 emotions on both sides. So optimism is a combination of anticipation and joy. You know, we feel good about it, but we're still anticipating what could happen. Anger and disgust, we feel contempt. Acceptance and fear, we are submission. That means we are submitting ourselves to what is going to happen, and we're not outwardly fearful of it, unlike awe, which means we could be fearful. Okay, so we can experience these blends of emotions, and that's what we just talked about in looking at the color wheel, and they can vary in their intensity. And I'm going to show you a 3D version of this color wheel that will help to explain that. So that the 8 emotions on top are intense versions of the 8 primary emotions. This will make more sense when I show you the visual. And so less intense emotions are seen then at the bottom. The stronger ones are at the top. And as they become less intense, they become a little bit meshed together. So if we look at our continuum that we did on the stage, for example, if this is our strong emotion and this is our weak emotion, remember this was English department and this was science department, as we get closer, as our emotions get less intense, we could think about them as being and the weaker part of it, and that they are less easy. It's harder to tell them apart. Okay, and so here then is our 3D version of it. So our really, really strong emotions are right here. Ecstasy, vigilance, rage, loathing, grief, all of those. These are our primary emotions. Okay, those are the ones we talked about on the outside of the wheel. And then as we go down toward the tip or the cone right there, we start to see that they are weaker and a little bit harder to discern from one another. So in terms of belief and emotions, of course our emotions are affected by our beliefs. And so we have all these social emotions that we haven't talked about yet. And so it's important for us to recognize that emotions are social and that it's due to our interaction with other people, and that our emotions are not only affected by other people, but our behaviors then, or our adaptive behaviors, are also affected by people. So in terms of belief, human intelligence and imagination mean that we are also able to anticipate and picture more distant dangers. So we can then use induction, and I know that's sloppy, but it works. We can use induction then to anticipate what's going to happen based on our previous experiences. And so a change in our beliefs then can lead to a change in a corresponding emotion. So for instance, if we see a coiled rope and we think it's a snake, initially we feel fear, but then when we have a change in our perception of it, we can use induction. We use induction initially to think it's a snake because it looks like a snake, but then we use our perception to counteract that, and then our fear disappears. And we no longer have the physical things that go along with that, and we get that really, really hot feeling when we're over and done with because we start to sweat because we're relieved. Emotional energy is something that's interesting also because we can't gain the knowledge that we need without the energy. And so without energy, when our emotional energy is taken away, we experience things such as writer's block, or we have experiments that fail and we feel down because of it. And something that's interesting here too is hunger. And so in terms of obtaining knowledge, when we're hungry, we cannot gain knowledge. And I mean this for real hunger, not just, you need a snack or a hold me over until your next meal. But this idea that real hunger can stop us from being productive. And on the other side of that hunger issue, or the writer's block, or the failing experiments, when we feel passion for a subject or a content area, we then feel motivated to do a really good job and be involved in that. And so that provides us energy to continue, so we keep going at it. Emotions can obviously serve as an obstacle, just like perception can serve as an obstacle. And so our perception sometimes can be colored by our emotions, and this is called emotional coloring. Our love is sometimes blind to the fault of those whom we love, and then loathing also enhances fault. And I think this goes into politics really easily. We don't like the opposing view politically, and so we automatically dislike very strongly other candidates and other positions simply because it's associated with the opposing view. And so also with reason, if we believe something with too much passion, it can prevent us to open-mindedness and seeing the other side. And so this goes along with that whole my theory is right attitude and the refusal to recognize the other side, which I think we've seen a lot here lately in politics. And so also with language, we see slanted and emotive language that will... sorry, this slanted and emotive language that is geared so that it can sway you into one idea or another. Okay, so here's some examples. We know cigarettes are bad for our health. Okay, so let's say, for example, I know cigarettes are bad for my health, yet I smoke cigarettes. So then I feel tension. I have internal conflict. And so because of that, I don't smoke, by the way. Because of that, I need to make decisions, and I have to decide to do either this or this. I can choose to accept that smoking is unhealthy and I give up smoking. Or I can choose to question the evidence and then continue to smoke. And so with everything that we do, we make rationalizations, we use reason, even, or rather in spite of, our perception and emotions at times. And this isn't showing up. And so we'll go over this tomorrow. Have a good night.